Good afternoon. I'm Joe Morris. I'm one of your Pac-West board members and education committee members. And welcome. We have a really cool, lively discussion topic today, and I'm glad you're all here. It's good to see everybody again. This is the supply chain and logistics panel discussion. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of our virtual sponsor conferences, all of our sponsors for the virtual conference. So real quick, we have ND Industries, Pac-West Platinum Partner. We have Star Stainless Screw, Pac-West Platinum Partner. We have Brighton Best International, Pac-West Gold Partner. And we have American Ring, Pac-West Gold Partner. We also want to thank our premium sponsors, Advanced Components, ADK Industrial Products, Empire Bolt and Screw, Pacific Warehouse Sales, and R&D Fasteners. And to all of the general sponsors, we thank you. Honestly, we cannot do any of these without you, and we really do appreciate you. Quick housekeeping rules before we get started. Everyone's going to be muted because there's a bunch of us. We would like you to utilize, we do want this to be, the whole point of this is it's not really a presentation. We have a panel, but it's a presenters that are going to just discuss their perspective on the topic based on their industry. But in order for this to work, we really do need participation from the audience. So to ask questions, you can put them in a chat, or if you joined us from our last session, we thought how everyone unmutes themselves works great. But so that we're not speaking over everybody, just type in either what your question is or that you would like to be unmuted, and we'll just go down the order. I'm going to be your moderator, so I'll let you know when you can unmute. And if you just prefer to type it in, certainly type your question in and I'll read it. I do have a handful of questions from participants that already emailed us. But again, it's a great topic. We have some great panelists, and we really want your involvement. So now I'd like to introduce you to our panel for today. We have Chris Donnell, the National Sales Director for Scanwell Logistics International. We have Danielle Riggs, Senior Director of Global Trade Logistics and Systems from Wurth Industry. And we have Bryan Wheeler, National Sales Manager from Star Stainless. So welcome to all of our panelists. And Bryan, why don't you kick it off?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I think I know most of you. I'm Bryan. I'm the sales manager for Star Stainless. Really just here to help kind of navigate, what we're seeing both on the supply chain and on our friendly logistics partners, and how we're beginning to move product, move things around, come into different ports than normal, to really just try to keep the flow of product going. As a stocking master distributor, people really do rely, on our inventory levels, and keeping those inventory levels up has been a struggle, as I'm sure everyone has been facing. So, I want to give our perspective on what we're doing to help keep that product flowing, and what we're changing to kind of keep those levels where they need to be.
Thanks, Bryan. Danielle, you're on.
Hi there, I'm Danielle Riggs. I'm with Wurth Industry of North America. I've been 15 years in the import-export industry, bringing people's goods into the country, working for an organization that's trying to get their things either into or out of the US, Canada, Mexico. We kind of deal in the North America region. So I'm here with the trying to get our stuff to our customers, or get it into our facilities, into our customers' perspective. Great to be here.
Thanks, Danielle. Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris Donnell. I've been with Scanwell. Well, I've been in logistics for 20 plus years. I'm not going to date myself, but I've been with Scanwell for the past 20 years in the logistics field, handling freight forwarding logistics, primarily from the Pac Rim to North America.
Excellent, thank you. If anyone has any questions for the panel, go ahead and say that you have a question, type it in. I'll kick it off with Chris. I'm going to point this to you, but certainly everybody, Bryan and Danielle, comment if you would like to. Chris, what are some of the factors that are currently driving the logistics market? And I know we have a lot of moving parts there. We've got offshore, we've got domestic, but can you identify or summarize some of the factors that are contributing right now?
It's all bad. Obviously, coming out of the Far East, we have a massive container shortage situation happening, as well as space, and that's certainly affecting the inbound market, and that's on a global scale. Some countries far worse than what we have it here in the United States in terms of cost. Being that with COVID still an issue, we just had Yantian, the port of Yantian, shut down due to COVID and the sickness there. That's already, we're already seeing a ripple effect throughout China because of it, primarily in Southeast China. But again, it's just another hurdle that the importers have to go through. We're seeing massive port congestion, especially on the West Coast. This is having a massive effect, especially coming out of Los Angeles as well as Oakland, where the people that are in those cities see those big vessels sitting off the coast. That's not going away anytime soon, regardless of what the port directors are saying. That has made transit times drastically increase. We're having rail issues as well as carriers stopping from moving cargo inland. That's causing massive issues with space as well. Rail issues. There's not as many rail cars out there as there needs to be. And that's creating further delays on the West Coast as well as the East Coast. Trucker shortages. I just had a trucker quote me to move something 300 miles from Savannah, about $3,000. So that was about 22, or it was about $17 a mile, which is insane. And that was simply because there's no truckers to be found, and if they have to drop somebody, importers are going to have to pay for it. On top of that, you still have COVID, which is in other countries such as India, Bangladesh, Brazil, that is negatively affecting the imports in the United States. But that's my 3,000 or 30,000 foot viewpoint of logistics right now.
Chris, what are some of the carriers doing in regards to the cargo selection? I mean, a lot of people may not know this, but do some have precedence over others?
Well, right now, most of the TSA carriers belong to one of these conglomerate organizations, and each carrier has its special niche in the marketplace where certain carriers are better out of Southeast Asia and have more space and capacity, where others, some are focused on Japan or Korea for that matter. But overall, all the carriers, and it doesn't matter whether you're a BCO or a small mom and pop importer, we're all being affected. I mean, every carrier out there is having the same issues. Those carriers that elected not to handle IPI or inland cargo, they are turning vessels a little more quickly than they were, because they're not having to deal with the rail. But at the same time, it's putting further strain on those carriers that are handling inland cargo, and that's causing rates to skyrocket. Over the past 2 months, rates have almost doubled. So,
Chris, when do you think that the container congestion and the reposition issues are going to get back to normal? There was a crane collapse in Taiwan yesterday, adding to the problems. It's just more and more and more. How long? Because you can read.
We're forecasting this isn't going to end until at least 2022, or end going into 2022, probably somewhere after Chinese New Year. But again, it all depends. There's a lot of parameters that go into this. September 6th is a big day that we're looking at in terms of the economy. That's a day that will kind of show, is this huge buying surge that we're seeing in North America, is that going to start to slow down? If so, then we'll get out of this a little quickly, or more quickly. If it continues, it could last well into 2022.
Okay. The next question I'm going to throw to you, Bryan, and Danielle or Chris, you may comment on it, but this has to do with steel and the raw material shortages. What's going on with that? This is before even logistics gets involved in it, but there's obviously a huge steel shortage. Just curious, and this question has come up. Do you think that the steel industry kind of hung back a little bit from reopening in an effort to try and push prices back up?
I don't necessarily know that it would be to push the prices back up. I mean, you've definitely seen it, but the raw material shortages that are there, and a lot of people that I speak to, it's capacity being down. A lot of it, they, contribute to being labor shortages from outside or for lack of foreign labor force. A lot of these overseas mills, they use foreign labor on their ends to help their manufacturing processes. And COVID had a pretty good impact on their ability to get those outside laborers into their buildings to be able to work. And because of that, they've seen their output capacity go down. And it's really been a terrible time for it because now you have production capacity down. You have your inbound inquiries outweighing that by quite a bit. So you have more orders that need to be filled and less material to be able to do it, which, supply and demand, you see a lot of it right now. The factories I speak to, they're on material allocation. So the mills are looking at what they purchased in previous years and only allowing them to buy up to those quantities or a percentage of those past quantities. So, you are starting to see, price filtering. There's not as much competition in the market right now at the factory level because, lead times are really long and they're not producing as much. So why take the cheap business when, there's very little capacity to be used right now? So I'm seeing quite a bit of that. Do I think that's going to really slow down? Right now our lead times are getting pushed out. Very, common for 75 to 90-day turnarounds for production. You're seeing 120, some even 180-day production times. Pair that with delays in freight, pair that again with with rail delays, and you really end up with, having to take a look at how you manage your inventory and allowing for enough time to be able to get product, into your buildings because it's taking, quite a bit longer.
On the heels of that, you mentioned personnel. Why is there just such a holdup? I mean, why are there so many? It's not like they got government stimulus. Is it because of government? Is it because of COVID and they're just keep getting hit with COVID? They had personnel before. Why is that a contributing factor?
So if you look at a lot of the factors like Taiwan, for example, they don't have enough of their own Taiwanese labor force to manage their factories. So they bring workers in from the Philippines. And because of COVID, the government doesn't allow for them to bring those employees into their country because they're restricting the amount of inbound, people that are being tested and cleared to work. And it's really, really low right now. And because of that, they're not able to get the people that they need to run their factories at their full 100% capacities. That's why you see that production quantity down where it is.
Gotcha. A comment from the audience is, I heard that China cannot buy iron ore from Australia right now. So China has the capacity, but not the material now. Can you please comment?
That's honestly something that I hadn't heard. I do know that China was doing a VAT rebate of 13% on exported raw material. So all the raw material that they would export to other nations, they were giving the mills, that rebate. And I know in May, first week in May, they pulled that. But as far as Australia, that's not something I'm familiar with.
I don't know that I've heard anything that I could share with that either from an import-export perspective, unfortunately. Yeah, staying on top of our own China tariffs and what we're doing over here has been tricky enough, but I don't know that I've heard anything either.
Danielle, in regards to tariffs and all trade remedies, they always distort the market a little bit. How did some of the recent tariffs, for instance, the Section 301, how is that affecting orders? I mean, is it really affecting import orders, or did they just divert all of the orders from China to somewhere else?
Yeah, truth be told, in our experience, I mean, we didn't divert a ton of stuff out of there. I mean, repricing, sometimes that 25% still proved to be okay. Our companies took great advantage of exemptions from that where we could. So across our Wurth industry, North America, 17 companies where we could play in the exemptions, we certainly did. So I think that helped us quite a bit. I think in 2020, we were able, by using exemptions, to avoid somewhere around 12 or 15 million in tariffs. So those exemptions are out there and usable if it's product that you're importing. But yeah, I don't know that we moved too much of our stuff elsewhere. I mean, what we could move, we did. And then the rest of it was just kind of an impact that we had to absorb with our customers.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. We are finding a lot of our suppliers with inventory on the East Coast and none on the West Coast. This is causing more delays and expenses in shipping. How are suppliers monitoring and replenishing West Coast warehouses? Bryan, can you take that one?
Well, I was just kind of thinking back to our inventory, because I actually tend to find the opposite, that our West Coast locations, but really for us, we break down our distribution centers inbound product based on those like commodity categories. So, a lot of sheet metal machine screw type product that's going into Chicago. Hex heads, nuts, and washers we have going into Houston. So we're breaking up, by product group. So, and we're doing constant inventory replenishment pretty much weekly to each location. But we've struggled with chassis shortages. As Chris mentioned, a lot of the in routes are difficult to get right now. Where we would normally just call and the trucking line come pick it up. We're waiting 3-4 days, another week or so on the rail on both ends. So that's been a struggle, and I think it's just constant movement and staying on top of it's the only way that you can really get ahead of it.
Thank
Well,
you.
and if the West Coast port congestion had anything to do with it, don't worry, it'll come to the East Coast soon. So they'll share where the congestion is as we all redivert, right? I mean,
Yeah, what's going on in the world? We obviously have some traffic jam here stateside.
yeah.
What about in other parts of the world?
I can answer that. Europe is being devastated right now, and they're now seeing the residual effects of what happened with the Suez Canal and the Ever Given that was blockading the canal. We're seeing places like Hamburg, Antwerp, and other major ports throughout Europe seeing their congestion increase rapidly, delayed in shipping. You're also seeing places coming out of India where carriers are completely foregoing calling on certain ports. Same thing goes with Southeast Asia. To kind of rewind and go back to the whole the Australia comment, that actually stems from Australia was holding a vessel from China, and because of their stance with China building their bases offshore and signing with the United States, China is taking the stance to blockade the iron ore going from Australia to China. That's still ongoing. That has not been lifted yet, but that's one of the reasons why there's an iron ore issue. So back to the original question, Brazil right now is being decimated by COVID. Sao Paulo, we're seeing 3 to 4 week delays in shipping to North America. Brazil, South America right now, obviously you're talking about a lot of vegetables, fruits, consumable products. Those are all going to be delayed to the market, obviously, and because of the delay, costs are skyrocketing. You look at cost of apples and oranges and bananas and things like that. They've all gone up. I just spoke to our office in London actually on Monday, and they were telling me that they're seeing container rates from China to the UK in excess of $20,000 for a 40-foot container. So I mean that's the direction that North America is going. So it's bad everywhere. It's not just isolated in North America.
Yeah, there's a comment from the audience that congestion, particularly in New York and New Jersey port, is high, 2 to 3 week delays minimum.
Yeah, a lot of that's also contributed to the lack of drivers that can actually will go in and pick up the containers at the port. So it's kind of a ripple effect. Once you have a glutton of containers and no truckers to pick those containers up, it just builds and builds and builds, and all of a sudden you have these towns that are just built up by containers, and it's a mess. And Savannah is getting just as bad.
That's
Right.
one thing, Joe, that we're starting to see and having to deal with quite a bit is, the trucker situation or the delays, in actual mounting and, loading. We talked to one of the trucking lines. They stated that, wait time at some of these places to, mount a container on a chassis and get it out 4 to 5 hours. So you think about it, if you got a driver that gets there late morning and it's got a 4 hour, wait to get mounted, a lot of times they can't deliver to your building before it closes. And then you get the storage fees, you get driver detention fees, and you start loading up you get an extra day rent, for the rental for the chassis. They start adding up. Before you know it, you get $1,000 bill to get that, to move from one place to the other, on top of what all your other fees were going to be anyway.
And that's especially bad for LA, where you have to actually schedule an appointment to go into the ports to get it. And when a driver's, in that 2 hour window that you have that appointment for, if it takes 4 hours, that driver's now made a dry run and has to go back to pick up that container, and someone has to pay for that driver to make that round trip. So, I mean, it's just bad everywhere.
All right, just a reminder to everybody, we do want to hear other voices other than ours. So if you'd like to join, just tell us that you'd like to unmute, and we're going to just say, call on you so that we're not speaking over each other. Cost of containers. Who wants to discuss this? Oh, and I just saw someone raise your hand. Keep in mind, Lori, you're next. So I can't see everybody. So if you put it into chat, I just happen to see you, Lori. So Lori, you're next. But if you put it into chat, because I can't see everybody physically raise their hand, so just put in your chat, I have a question, and then I'll be able to watch that. But real quick, before we go to you, Lori, cost of containers, what is up with it? Why is it because we're just so slow on returning them? What's up with that?
It's because freight forwarders are evil.
Yeah.
Chris, why don't you take that one?
Man,
Yeah.
I knew that was coming. They're not to speak over anybody. There's a lot of factors that go into play in terms of costs. You've got the buying surge in North America has caused so much production in the Far East, and there's just so many containers. There's a massive shortage in containers right now in terms of what the containers that actually are moving. There's just so much space on a vessel. That's a contributing factor. The fact, and COVID still plays a big part of it. That's having a really massive effect on the ports in Los Angeles. So there's a lot of different variables in terms of what's going in, what makes an ocean rate an ocean rate. And I can tell you it's going nowhere but up.
So they're charging more because they can.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say you've got desperate people out there too, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes who's going to pay the highest to grab the space if you haven't had great processes and an awesome forwarder as a partner before now, right?
Yeah. All right, thank you, Lori. You're up.
What's the total import volume? This is, a question maybe Danielle or Chris now. How does the 2021 import tonnage, like the volume, compare to say 18 or 19? We talk about it as a surge, but is it a surge that's beyond what we've seen in the last, few years? Or is it just a surge against where there was in 2020?
Danielle, I don't want to talk over you.
No, go for it. I was off in trade compliance land back then, so I was staying away from moving anything.
The real surge actually started mid 2020, as soon as the floodgates opened and our government here started printing money and issuing stimulus checks. Right now, ocean volumes are up more than 30% versus the same time last year. So you're talking, and you look at how many containers are moving on a day-to-day basis. That's a huge increase in volume, huge. And we're not even factoring what isn't being moved right now. And that number is expected to grow.
Yeah, but I guess my question was that's comparing it against 2020, but how does the numbers compare if you look further back to say 19 or
Q1 2020 even? Because I had read an article that they were flat for years, and then but we're up 10% from Q1 of 2020.
20, Joe, you are correct in that. is that the number actually is right around 17%, that they're up from 2019, 2018, 2019. Relative, when the carrier says that, they were flat, that really depends on what you call flat. Simply because, I mean, these are publicly traded companies and they have to broadcast what their profits and losses were. Certain carriers obviously did much better than others. And with the change in things, you looked at certain carriers that were on the verge of bankruptcy going into 2019, 2020, that are now, certainly out of the red and now into the black. But yes, volumes have dramatically increased since 2019.
Because we have all that extra money and we're buying goods. I mean, we had the stimulus checks and we're buying goodies, and it's interrupting our fastener stuff that we have to get over.
It's not just fasteners. I mean, look at the price of a pallet right now.
Right.
Pallets right now are in shortage. So it's crazy. It's affecting everybody.
Okay, Lori, I apologize. You are on.
So kind of two questions, and they're somewhat related. Two issues that we're seeing, and I'm Lori from Viking Bolt, Lori Colbert. And so a couple of issues we're coming across is just the time involved when we place the order, and it's local. We can see from our supplier that it's here in the US. So, not local to Portland, but in the US, it's taking up to a week and a half just to maybe get it pulled and start shipping through UPS. And is that just the lack of workforce, in the warehouse? So first question. And then the second part is the timing on quotes. Obviously they're getting shorter and shorter. So, we're having the problem of we're getting a quote, say on a Thursday afternoon. We send that to our customer, they send the PO on Monday, and we're finding that price is no longer good. And, that's a couple of days. And so kind of from the supplier's star, how you're managing that quote time.
Yeah, so our quote validity right now is set at 5 days. I'll tell you, my quotes when I go overseas come back with a note on the bottom that says subject to change at any time. I could go back, get a price, go back 3 hours later, send the order, and there's a chance that they'll come back and tell me that price is no longer valid. And, for that, a lot of it is material is getting gobbled up so fast, and they only take so many material orders before they close the month out. My understanding is that for the stainless side of the world, June 10th, they're anticipating the majority of the mills will close their June bookings. So, a lot of it is, Laura, a lot of different things. As far as, quote time really is depending on the items, the availabilities. Just because the quote may have expired doesn't necessarily always mean the price isn't going to be valid. But really for us, it's kind of a protection side of things to make sure, because the market is so volatile, that we have our bases covered and you're not holding a price out that you can't get anymore.
Well, okay, so I should correct myself. So the price is no longer valid. And so, the problem we're having is, we get the price, we send the price, it takes a day because I'm sure they're getting quotes from a variety of distributors, right? And so then 2 days later, when we're awarded the PO, now our price is no longer good. And so we, obviously have to figure out what to do, but that's the problem we're having. And it's just, so quick. So it's not just the quote, it's really the price is no, and it's been a significant increase.
Oh yeah, the increases, when you look at the side of things, pricing isn't just piece costs. Pricing is everything that involves getting a part from manufacturing to end user sold. So it's the material, it's the exchange rates, it's the freight costs, and it's all aspects of the freight that we previously discussed to move it there. So when we're looking at things, when everything is changing as drastically as it has been from all angles, material prices are jumping, exchange rates are going down. Freight costs on the ocean are going up. Freight costs on the trucking lines are going up. The rails are going up. It really causes, pricing to move really quick when you're getting hit from every angle.
Mhm.
I was
You know,
going to add in there, I mean, from a just, I'm not in the buying the parts part. I'm in the moving them to get them to us kind of, arrangement. But in the purchasing of freight space, it's the same game, right? If I go to a carrier or a forwarder and ask them for some space and they come back to me and I'm like, "Oh, I got to ask 4 people and I'll be back. I've lost it. It's gone, it's crazy everywhere. So if I think of that impact, I can imagine what's happening on the buying side, right? Because you're trying to get your hands on that stuff.
I'm
Then you
going
go
to
into your
interject.
warehouse and wonder why it takes you so long out there. And well, gosh, half your containers are taking 30+ days to get here, get on the water even, right? So everything's cattywampus and everyone's running and it just causes all of that delay down the line.
I'm going to interject with a question because it's timely, and then we're going to go to Clay and then Hans. But here's a comment from our audience. Speaking of exchange rates, how much is that factoring into the change in costs on a daily or weekly basis?
I would say it's more on a monthly basis.
Okay. All right. Clay, you typed in a lovely question. Would you like to ask it?
Sure. I'll try to keep it short. If somebody can kind of eloquently explain to everybody why these prices in the containerized freight are so out of control and how maritime that goes back, prior to all of our times protects them and essentially price fixing, utilizing GRIs, ERIs, and just really colluding to stay solvent during these times and really prop up their balance sheets. As you guys mentioned, a lot of them came out of the red into the black during these times. Really have benefited during COVID.
Well, Clay said eloquently. So Chris, that one's for you.
Oh, man. The FMC, which is the Federal Maritime Commission, tried to step in, and they did a study with the carriers. Long story short, their direction was to go after the Jones Act in terms of price fixing and things of that nature. However, and by all means, I'm not an ocean carrier, so I'm in the same boat you are in the sense that I've seen these rates skyrocket. But the carriers are in a unique position to where it's basically supply and demand, and that goes for every industry out there. When you have a glutton of supply, they're able to manipulate the rates, and the fact that not all carriers have the same rates is how they escape the whole price fixing situation. So as an example, CMA may have $9,000 a container to Chicago, whereas Yang Ming, and I'm just using this as an example, could have 10,000. They're able as a carrier to set their own price structure. Well, the fact that they're very close to each other raises a lot of red flags, especially to importers and logistics companies. But that's how they get around it. I hope I answered your question as best as I can. The FMC did conclude their study and say there's really not a whole lot they can do at this point to help mitigate the situation. We're basically leaving it into the hands of the carrier to dictate the market.
Clay, are you good?
Yeah, Chris, thank you. It's frustrating, but I think you explaining it to everybody helps everybody understand that there is, in essence, price fixing, but yet they are able to get under through some of these provisions. And, they obviously there's a vested interest in them all staying profitable, because if they go out of business, which we've seen a lot of consolidation, the end effect is price really becoming more of a monopoly, if you will.
All right. Mr. Fuller, you're up.
I know you knew I couldn't stay quiet for that long, right? I think this is for Lori. I think going back a couple of things. We're up here in Canada. I think we're seeing the same thing, but our warehouses are really busy. All our competitors are really busy. We can't get stuff out the door. Sometimes, some guys are taking a week. We're not that long, but some of the other guys do. And a couple other interesting points. For steel, what we're seeing out of Taiwan is that we're actually getting rationed. They're saying that, okay, your normal monthly buy is like 30 tons or 40 tons, whatever, and they'll say you cannot buy any more than that. Well, they're going back historically and saying, sorry, we're not taking any new orders from any new customers. We can only get so much steel. This is what you can order, and that's it. And I think in the way it's working now, if our customers are saying, okay, we're going to do it like the old way, where I get a request from 10 different guys out there, and 4 days later I place the order, that just doesn't work. The stuff's gone. So I think we have to tell our customers to, okay, here's the order, I can get it, and you better jump on it, because if you're going to give me that order a week from now, it's just, it's different times. We just have to work through it, and hopefully by, next year we'll be a little bit better. And we're also in a weird situation. We have a warehouse in Shanghai, and we're so full because we can't get the parts over here. So we have the inventory. I'd love to sell it, but I can't get it over here, and we can't even take orders from our vendors, into the warehouse, because we have to empty it to get some new stuff in. So it's kind of strange times.
What about air options?
You can't fly steel bolts.
Yeah, no. So you got it, you just can't sell it.
Yeah, it just can't get it over here, and you can't pay $20,000 a container when the products were 20,000, or it's just it's not going to work.
Okay.
Can I ask Hans, if you don't mind me asking, what price point do you say it's just not worth to ship? Because, and I'm only saying this because economists are actually saying that the containers by year end could potentially hit $20,000 a container. What would you do?
Well, we're luckily in one way where we can get stuff from different places in the world. We're using, we can get some LCL stuff and trickle things in. But I think if we're getting much past $5,000 or $6,000, then it would almost be just not worth even moving it.
It's something, Chris, that when people see the price jumps and they're like, oh, but the material prices haven't moved that much. But I mean, you talk a $20,000 container at 36-ish thousand pounds a container, you're like 50-something cent, 55 cents a pound in freight cost. So if you're looking at bolts, and you're looking at your piece cost, by its unit weight, add 55 cents to it, and that's just the freight. That's just the ocean freight at a $20,000 container. So, if you're talking, bolts that are, I don't know what a steel bolt costs, I'll be honest with you, but I imagine it's not very much.
Less than stainless.
Add 55 cents to a steel bolt, that's 55 cents, your cost is doubling just because of the movement of the freight.
What's that going to do to all the smaller and medium-sized distributors? If we have suppliers that are allocating how much, and they're saving most of their steel, most of their product for some of their larger customers, what's it going to do to the medium-sized and smaller distributors? Well,
we help the guys who've bought from us. We have our key accounts, and we will give those guys first crack. If you don't buy from us normally, you're just not going to get the stuff. It's just, we're going to take care of the people who take care of us, because this is a cyclical game. We're in the driver's seat now, but it changes around pretty quick.
Okay. Hans, you shared, and I watched it last night, a really interesting video on what the real cause of this is, and you can elaborate on it. I thought it was really interesting. It was kind of the premise of COVID may have really caused this, but it's not really the cause. It's because we've got a supply chain that's extraordinarily vulnerable right now. And is it in fact that our misuse of just-in-time inventory really causes?
That's it. I put up the link to everybody. If you have 5 or 10 minutes to watch it, it's actually, it's pretty cool. And the premise there is that basically not applying GIT theory properly, because not assessing the risk of parts to supply chain disruption, where this, the concept here is saying, a 6 mil nut or 1/4 inch nut, you can get that pretty well anywhere, and it's not a big deal. But when you've got your C and D parts, or parts that are really critical, just like chips for automotive, you can't just do that GIT in the same way. Someone needs to stockpile, somebody needs to mitigate the risk of supply chain disruption, because it will happen. It's not a, there's natural disasters, there's whatever. So it's a cool little video that kind of points out that JIT works when everything comes in a good way, but as soon as things get a little bit dicey, your approach to it should be a little different.
That was interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Danielle, anti-dumping regulation, is that affecting any of this? Are any of the Chinese factories a little hesitant to accept orders for fear of cancellation if those measures are enacted? What are your thoughts?
Well, so we implemented a long time ago, gosh, maybe my 4 years ago being here, that we just won't import ADD affected products. The impact that it has on you as an importer, from your customs bond to your the level of scrutiny you're receiving is just not worth it ever. Those entries stay open forever. You filed an entry for something you sent to a customer in 2015, and in 2020 you're getting a bill for additional duties because the anti-dumping order changed, and it went from 100% duty, 100% adder to 220%. So it's just way too risky. So I don't know that it has much of an impact in the larger, like, receiving your freight stuff, but from an importer perspective, I would tell you I wouldn't do it. If you find a customs surety company that's going to keep you as a customer when you import that kind of stuff, that's one thing, but it's just those are tough products. We don't do it.
I have one comment to that, Joe, just as an example.
Please go ahead.
Danielle, we had last year by accident, we got some threaded rods that we imported into the US just one time. We know not to do washers, we know not to do rods, and it just kind of slipped through. And oh my God, just the bond, the customs, the backtracking, that this was a mistake, it'll never ever happen again. Yeah, it's absolutely not worth it. If there's anti-dumping on something, go to another country.
Yeah. And then sign the piece of paper that says you'll never do it again and make that mistake a second time.
Yeah.
And your surety's firing
you're
you. And
done.
then, yeah. Yeah.
Chris, what can importers do to help get the best possible cost and space? Is there any favoritism that they're placing? Are there certain commodities that are moving over others? What are your pearls of wisdom for us?
My suggestion for anyone that's an importer, collaborate heavily with your provider, your logistics provider. Make bookings, weeks and months in advance. That's going to help you in terms of cost. It's the importers that are booking today and expect to move tomorrow that are paying the highest cost, simply because they have to go out to the market. The logistics provider has to go out to the market and buy space. But for those customers that are, have bookings that are, as an example, I have a client that, I have bookings all the way until October right now. And we, haven't really had a hitch in terms of moving, their volume. And again, understand that what you're importing is heavy product. Carriers right now would much rather move the fluff cargo, the pillows, the feathers, things of that nature, because they can utilize more containers onto their vessels, and ultimately make more money, because that typical fluff cargo typically comes in a 40-foot container. So that's another thing that you have to understand. Understand that there's no two ports the same way. So if you, in your supply chain, if you're, as an example, shipping out of Ningbo right now, which is critical, you have to collaborate with your providers and make sure that you're providing them as much information well in advance. Create an air of transparency between the supplier, your provider, and you as much as possible. That will help you as well.
Okay, thank you. George Hunt, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to read it?
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Apologize.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Chris, you had spoke a little bit briefly about everyone's waiting for this September 6th date. Can you elaborate a little bit on the significance of this date and what it means?
Well, there's a lot of the stimulus is supposed to run out at that point. You also have issues with unemployment. You know, we have a hard time here, and I'm sure everyone here is running into the same issues. Is finding adequate employees, trying to bring people in, because simply it's it's too much of a benefit for people to sit at home and collect stimulus checks and unemployment. And so that's causing a lot of people to not even go out into the market. And September 6th, that's when what the economists are saying, the floodgates are going to open and a lot more people are going to be returning back to the workforce. If they return back to the workforce, they're not at home, they're not spending, and that should also help reduce in the glutton of cargo that's coming in. Hope I answered your question, George.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it goes to Lori's initial question at the beginning as well. I know we were talking a lot about pricing, but getting into lead times and shipping orders and all that other stuff, the labor market is severely depleted right now. And that's what we're really looking towards in order to try to make this right and getting our labor force back whole and trying to get back within, a day or two of shipping. So thanks, Chris.
My pleasure.
On the lights at the end of the tunnel. Trevor, would you like to ask your question? Do you not have me?
Yeah, I think Trevor from Pacific Bolt Manufacturing. Yeah, I think that the labor is a huge factor in it, because I think there's been absolutely no immigration in the last basically year and a half. So much of that low-paying warehouse work hasn't been backfilled since COVID started. And I think that's a huge factor in all of these supply chains and warehouses and movements of goods. And I just see it driving down the road where every single warehouse that I drive by has a help wanted sign. And I think the other issue we're all seeing is the $15 minimum wage that's coming up basically everywhere in the US now. And I guess unless it's Alabama, so, or right to works, but that affects, I think, a lot of the pricing, because we're now paying $20, $30 an hour for warehouse workers, where you're used to a lower wage rate. So I think those are all factors too that are really affecting us right now.
Great.
Also,
go ahead. Sorry.
So Laura, a lot of it is also the way that people are purchasing. People are purchasing in higher volumes and more frequently. I think people are starting to get accustomed to having the longer lead times, both for shipping, and for the freight side. So people are buying more frequently and in higher quantities. So, more orders pouring into the warehouses with the same or struggling workforces. It's more things to pull and less people, to do it. And even if it was the same amount of people, the order, influx, especially to some of your, larger, stocking distributors, Star, and BBI, I'm sure you guys are feeling it too. It's a lot of orders coming in, and we're going to get to the point where people really need to understand that the same day shipping, the same day pickups, and then even the foreign buys, I see a lot of people, oh, can you get me a mill price? I'll start taking parts in November. I'm like, sure, I'll give you a price, but you're not going to be importing that item. If we're putting the order in today, you're not going to have that landed here in November. So you're looking at, doing a stock buy to cover you until 2022, when you really start getting your inbound goods coming in. And I think people really need to start taking a look at where you're purchasing out to. Purchasing out to 2022, that's like a reality. Purchasing out to the second quarter of 2022 is like planning ahead. This thought to where things are going to be at the end of the year, that's right around the corner. I mean, I get quotes coming back now from overseas shipping December 31st, and you figure on the water 6 to 8 weeks if delayed. 2-week delay at the rail, you're what, 30 weeks by the time you get that item, and that's provided there's no internal delays on anybody's end that's going to move it. These lead times are pushed. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. When a factory used to quote 75 to 90 days for production, you get 120 to 180 days. Add in the ocean freight delays, add in the rail delays and the truck delays. It's no 5 months and it's ready to ship. It's taken a long time.
And something, if I can add to that, it's, importers need to be wary of, we're going into golden quarter now, and you've got your big box companies now that are going to start bringing in a lot more product for the holidays, and that's just going to eat up additional space. So when you talk about lead times, I drastically tell my clients, focus on your lead times right now, because what you may have a 35-day lead time today, but in August, that lead time may be 45 to 50 days.
And for those who, normally you see August is, coming into August, Chris, I believe it's August is when a lot of your like big box retailers are stocking up for the holidays. But with the additional delays, you're starting to see that holiday rush like right now.
Yeah.
Well, so not to be, if you attended our first session, it was about optimism, and we have to push for those who are optimistic perform higher and better, and we have to recover quickly. But I have a question. So we've got increased traffic at the ports. We've got union workers out sick. We've got shortages of containers. We've got truck drivers that aren't able to do it. Does anyone think that this might contribute to engineers designing less fasteners? Because when you think about it, fasteners represent maybe 1% of the total cost of goods to produce something. But when you don't have it, it stops production. And you hear about the electric vehicles, electric cars, and how many fewer fasteners are in it. Do you think this is going to affect engineering and how many fasteners are used? Currently not. I think it will, and it's kind of sad. I think the OEM world is going to start engineering out fasteners as much as they can. They already are. Electric vehicles, I think, use 100 fasteners, whereas engines were 300 fasteners. So I'm fearful that it's going to affect all of us.
Yeah, but the problem with that electric engine is you got the chips that go into providing, the power for that engine, and fortunately manufacturers can't buy chips, so it's kind of a catch-22.
Unless they're Toyota and they stockpile them, and watch Hans's video and you'll see that.
So Joe, I think I don't think engineers think about fasteners very much. Fasteners just kind of appear out of nowhere and just are available the next day. I think that's kind of,
Yeah, but now they're not available. That's my point. And they don't cost as much as everything else, but now they're not available and they're holding up production. So now, that what used to be, they're the Class C items that no one wanted. But when you don't have them, it becomes an elevated issue for a topic.
Maybe
Joe.
Yes, Ron.
Yeah, just speaking to that as an engineer, the one thing that I will say is that the nature of a bolted joint is usually bolted or it's welded. Now, there's other ways to do it, but welding is otherwise the other option. And that takes time and skill, and that skill is being more and more lost amongst the trades. So I'm not sure that there's that much risk for it. I think there's more answers to finding other ways to provide fasteners maybe to the industry other than the traditional ways.
I hope you're right. And yeah, I think you're, I don't think they're going to just disappear, but I have always been a little fear that this might be a push to have less of them. But Ron, I agree with you. I think you're right. We do have another comment. I think inflation is the elephant in the room. How long can price increase before demand slows? And I'll open this up really to anybody, our panelists, but if a member would like to comment.
This is a conversation that we have in our organization all the time is, at what point is the price going to slow down the demand? And I think we're probably getting close. I think a lot of it right now is you haven't had enough time for people to come up with alternatives. So right now they're paying the price to keep the production lines moving, keep the flow going. But how long can that really stay? And I think your freight, it's probably going to get to the point too, where it's going to start to see it, where the cost to get it here, the total overall cost of the goods is just going to exceed what the market will bear. And that'll start to draw things down a little bit.
Yeah, and this is where I still have a fear of, I'd like to protect our smaller distributors, and I hope they're not eaten up through this, because they don't have the customers that will support the higher prices. But Danielle, how is the Wurth group? Things are crazy busy, and you're keeping up with demand.
Well, I live on that scheduling sign where I see all the containers that are backed up and not making it over here. So for me, most days feels like I'm not sure what's happening. I'm just kind of drowning in there with the rest of everyone. But I mean, we're getting stuff here. We're keeping our customers up and running. So this is the struggle right now. But hopefully the world evens itself out a little faster than, well, I guess September 6th isn't so far away, but hopefully we even ourselves out a little faster, get back to a bit of norm.
Chris, we're holding you to September 6th.
No.
Yeah. And this is recorded.
You want to make the legal claim now? Nothing that I've said here can be used.
Right.
Order now. Order now. Well, I see smiling faces. If anyone else has some comments, please offer them. I think it's a great discussion group. We can go on and on.
I have kind of an offbeat question now, because I'm on the logistics side and the transportation side. I always ask my clients, how are the demand that you're seeing now, obviously rates skyrocketing. How are you keeping up with that demand in that change? Because it's in the transportation world, it's almost overnight that the rates are changing. And as a seller, you have to sell your products to your client. How are you keeping up with those changes? And obviously I'm hoping, knock on wood, that everyone is making more money today than they were a year ago or 2 years ago, due to the increase in cost. But how are you guys keeping up with that?
Bueller? Would anyone like to comment?
Raise your prices.
Yeah, you have to do that in order to survive. I hope everybody is. There's no way.
Limit supply to some. Take care of your key customers. Take care of the guys who took care of you, because this is going to turn around, and that's always my. This is a short-term thing. It's gonna, when we get into Q2 or Q3 next year, who knows what it's going to look like, and I hope some of them remember that, who we'll take care of you now, and hopefully you help me out later.
Yeah, this I think comes down to loyalty. Those who have been loyal to their suppliers will win.
Yeah, I think, Chris, to your point, I think we've really noticed over the last 4 months or so, maybe 6 months, it was the loyal suppliers and the loyal customers are the ones that are really helping you out right now, especially on the supplier end from the mills. It's the fly-by-night guys really aren't. So it really shows that you have to have really good supply chains and work with like proper logistics companies and suppliers and customers, because that's who's getting you through this kind of mess. It's if you were the guy just shopping around for the last 5 years, you're probably in a bit rougher shape right now.
And the reason I ask is because every day I'm inundated with new opportunities coming to me. Like, these people live under a rock or something. It's like, why are yesterday I was paying $2,000 a container, and I'm like, no, you weren't. I know you weren't. And and for me, it's hard for me to go to my clients and say, well, your container went from 2,000, it's now 6,000. And their reaction to me is that you're out of your mind. I can move this. I have no problems with my other logistics company, and I'm paying a fraction of your cost. Well, then why are you calling me? And that's always been my question: are you guys facing the same type of issue?
Chris, those are the same customers that I think Trevor is, was alluding against. That's the low cost finder. And typically when they come back to you angry because of how expensive it is and that they could find it so much cheaper and you welcome them to do so, those come right back and, well, you know what, fine, I'll just do it. So I said, well, yeah, the market is drastically changed over the last 10 months, or more. So, to say, but I bought it in September at this price. Well, that was September 2020. Quite a bit's changed. We're now, June 2021, and you got to get with the current time.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we are at ending time on the dot. But before I say goodbye and I do a closing, panelists, is there anything you'd like to close with? Comment?
Great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
I would suggest as the person that's planning this stuff, trying to get freight into our companies, now's a good time to have a good hard look at your freight processes and your freight partners. And to everyone's conversation here, if you're the low cost shopper, you will find yourself in big trouble. That will happen. So make use of this time in identifying the weaknesses in the processes you have, and think about how you can do it differently, because that's the way you're going to survive this piece.
From the supplier side, I would definitely say, these are the times where you want to sit down and work with your suppliers on kind of planning your future need, and making sure that, everything is in place that can possibly be in place to ensure that you're going to have a steady flow of product. And, I'm always conservative when looking at things. To me, it is not terrible to be looking all the way out to the second quarter of next year. Because, I think what you're going to find as far as on-hand available inventory, if you're finding holes and availability now, I think, the next 60 days plus are going to be even more trying. It's going to be worth looking at.
Thanks, Brian. Chris, any closing comments?
Just understand that right now, the price is, and I hate saying this, is pretty relative. Right now, the battle is space. And if you're an importer and you get a booking, and keep that booking, don't cancel it. Don't try and fish the market for a cheaper price. Keep that booking, because right now that's a valuable commodity in the marketplace.
All right, excellent advice. I love this discussion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. And thank you, everyone who joined us. Join us. The next session is Thursday, June 10th, day 2 of our virtual spring conference. A survey is going to be sent out via email, and take a couple minutes, because Pac-West loves to hear how we can improve upon this. So thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you Thursday.
Thank you.